Northern Hemisphere on Monday, April 15th, 2013. I am your jet-lagged host, Todd Klindt, and tonight's show, as always, is brought to you by the fine folks at Rackspace. Not only do they pay my paychecks, they got me that nice flag, they bought me that monitor, and they support all the download bandwidth. When you download this Netcast, and if you download the video version, it is huge. I think it's partially because of my forehead. Those files are gigantic, and but they come down just lickety-split, just lightning fast, and that's all because of Rackspace. So if you need hosting, SharePoint hosting, you can go to Rackspace.com, or if you want to hear about the SharePoint stuff, you can go to Rackspace.com/SharePoint and jump in the chat thing, tell them how you heard about them, and all that. It'll be great. It'll be great stuff. So this Netcast brought to you by Rackspace. It's been a couple of weeks, so we'll move on to the production notes. It's been a couple of weeks since I did a Netcast, so I can't remember all the things that I screwed up. Let's assume that I did everything fine, and that everything was produced quickly and efficiently, and all that. I did plan on doing a Netcast last week, and so I'm going to tell you my sordid, sorry tale of why there was no Netcast. So the next bit, I'm going to talk about the Australian SharePoint conference, but I was in Sydney, Australia last week at this time, one week ago, and I had every intention of doing a Netcast. So I brought those two cameras, I brought this microphone, I brought my smiling face. I was all ready to go. And so I was going to power through the jet lag. I didn't know how bad a jet lag it would be. For me, Australia is 15 hours ahead, and I had roughly 20-some hours of travel time. I had no idea what kind of shape I was going to be in when I got there Tuesday morning, because obviously it's Tuesday morning there when it's Monday night here. But I was going to do it. For you folks, I was going to do it. I was going to power through no matter what. I already had a backup host planned in case I just couldn't be coherent for 40 minutes or so. I thought of everything. You guys were going to get taken care of. Then got in my plane. I flew from Des Moines to Minneapolis, Minneapolis to LA, 15 hours to Sydney. I landed in Sydney. My bag did not. Anybody want to guess where all my fancy podcasting equipment was at? In my bag, in Minneapolis, where I was not. So I had not planned for that, and so I didn't have my microphone, I didn't have my cameras, all I had was my laptop, and that, I just from how this thing works, I need two video cameras to stream and record, and even if I would have been able to use the camera in my my laptop, I wouldn't have been able to stream or whatever, and then the audio would have been terrible because I didn't have a mic. It was a bad deal. But I still thought about, well, trying to power through and figure something out. And then I got to the hotel, the place where I was going to record my Netcast, and they wouldn't let me check in. I got there at like 7 o'clock in the morning, something like that, and they weren't going to let me check in. So I had no gear and no place to do the Netcast. So Doug in the chat room, I think, was it, said that I should have carried it all on. Granted, I agree that probably would have worked. This microphone here weighs a good 10 pounds, all right, maybe 5. But also my bag was already full of things to keep me from going stir crazy in the 15 hours between LA and Sydney. There just wasn't a bunch of time. So that is my excuse. And the funniest part of all, no jet lag. I was absolutely fine. I was a little tired when we landed because I can't sleep on planes, but I'd have been fine. The Netcast would have went off without a hitch. But that is why there was no Netcast last week. I apologize for that. I really wanted to do one. I've really been focusing and trying to be consistent with this thing and doing one once a week, no matter what. And I let y'all down last week, and I apologize for that. But on the heels of that, I was in Australia last week at the SharePoint conference down there, and in the chat room, Bruce Albany can vouch for it. He is in Sydney right now, and he actually saw me. We went out to lunch on Friday. Got to meet him and Perry, another guy that pops into the chat room a bunch, and their coworkers. Had a great time. It was a good time. But for the conference, so the conference was Wednesday and Thursday. I want to give a special thanks out to Debbie Ireland, Mark Rhodes, Nick Hadley, and one other person whose name escapes me. They were the team that put the whole conference together. I wanted to thank them for including me, even though they already had 2 IT Pro guys that were better than me on the docket already. They had Mike Knoll and Dan Holm, and so there really wasn't much that I was going to be able to bring to the table because those guys were already there. But it was a blast. I did 3 sessions for them. I did 1 session on installing and configuring the Office web apps and getting that all wired up. I did a session on how super awesome SQL is, and I did a session on configuring all of the App Store stuff with SharePoint, creating the the web application and wiring it all up and all those things. Great time. I also took part in a SharePoint game show Thursday morning during the keynote. They had a 4-person SharePoint game show, and it was, if I remember correctly, Nick Hadlin, Daniel McPherson, Elaine Van Bergen, pardon if I mispronounce your name, and myself, Mark Rhodes, moderated. And most game shows, give you points for correct answers. This one did that. But this one also gave you points for funny answers, whether they were correct or not. And they gave you, at the end of every round, the audience got to vote somebody off, apparently regardless of how many points you had. So if you could cater to the crowd and suck up to the crowd, maybe they would save you. I was kind of in my element. Even if I didn't know the answer, there was always some stupid thing that wanted to come out of my mouth. And so I did pretty well. I won the SharePoint game show. Now I was expecting a huge trophy and perhaps being carried out of the conference hall on people's shoulders. All that didn't quite happen, but they seemed to be pretty excited about all that. So I had a blast at the SharePoint conference. It was a really well run conference. They did everything. They did a lot of great things. One of the things that they did was they had a character named SharePoint Sam, and he was a character they've got on their website and all that. But there was somebody in the crowd. One of the people at the conference was actually Sam, and Sam has a Twitter account and a Facebook page and all that, and he would give clues as to where he was and what he was doing. And if you figured out Sam's real identity, you could win prizes. Excuse me. And so that was kind of fun. I figured out Sam's identity pretty quick because Sam, yeah. And anyway, I don't want to give it away because I know they're doing it in New Zealand this week, and I don't want to give any of it away. But they just did all kinds of really fun things. So hats off to those guys. They did a great job. Thanks so much for including me in all the fun and taking good care of me. Outside of that, a buddy of mine in Sydney, Ivan Wilson, invited me to speak at the Sydney SharePoint user group. So I did that on Wednesday night, and then Ivan took me out for a run Friday and tried to kill me. Mission nearly accomplished, but not quite. And had a blast. Like I said, I had lunch with Bruce and Perry on Friday. I mean, I know a bunch of these people. I've met a bunch of these people before, so it wasn't a surprise. But the Australians just were incredibly gracious hosts. They took really good care of me, even when I didn't have any clean clothes and couldn't shower. Everybody seemed to be fairly happy to see me. So had a great time. Would love to do it again. I'm already in the back of my head trying to figure out the next way that I'm going to get down to Sydney and see all my friends again. So thanks to those guys down there again. It was a great time. It was an absolutely great time. Okay, so I had a bunch of stuff. I actually had all my notes for last week's Netcast. I wrote them before I left in case I was too incoherent to write them before the recording, but then it didn't happen. So now I've got a bunch of stuff for this week, so I might scoot some stuff to next week. We'll just have to see how everything goes. So for the past week, there have been a bunch of patches and stuff come out. So as you guys all know, I've got my toddklindt.com/SP2010 patches and my toddklindt.com/SP2013 patches blog posts that cover all the patches, and so I kind of want to cover all that now. The big news is that the SharePoint 2010 SP2 beta, not RTM, beta, is now publicly available, and that beta will put you at build 14.0.7011. You have to get it on Microsoft Connect, so it's going to be at connect.microsoft.com, and you got to go through all the stuff, and you can get it there. I am certain that somebody at Microsoft sat down and said, how can we make downloading this beta as painful as humanly possible? And they had they had the marbles and the string and the mouse trap and the fan and all that kind of stuff. And that's basically what you have to go through to download this thing. You got to take a survey and agree to a bunch of stuff. And then they drop you on a page that's got 30-some downloads, and you got to filter by builds and filter by server, and it's a gigantic pain to download. But it is all there. I've downloaded it all. I haven't installed it all yet. Kind of the big things to mention, though, for those of you that are going to take it, put this on a test server. It's a beta. In the past, betas haven't always upgraded to RTM versions, so don't do this in a production environment. You are a fool if you do that. Do it in a test farm. The big deal that this thing adds, I mean, it adds a bunch of stuff, obviously, but the big deal is it adds Windows 2012 support to SharePoint 2010. And obviously, in order for that to work, you're going to have to slipstream this patch into your install and then install it all in one time. And it looks like, from the stuff that I've looked at, it looks like it slipstreams exactly the way that all the other patches do. So, expand out your SharePoint 2010 installation, extract out the SP2 beta, dump it in the updates folder, and then install it. But haven't had a chance to play with that yet. But hopefully in the coming days I'll be able to. And then, shortly after that came out, the April 2013 cumulative update for SharePoint 2010 came out. That will put you at build 14.0.6137, and I haven't looked at that at all. I know that it's there. I'll have the download links in the show notes for this, but it's a cumulative update. You'll notice the build number is lower than SP2, but I'm guessing they locked down SP2 the bits and all that a while back, so there's going to be that awkward time right after every service pack where, like, the next CU is an earlier number but has later things. It's going to be kind of ugly for a bit. So please plan this stuff wisely. Now that we know that Service Pack 2 is almost out, Service Pack 2 is definitely something you're going to want to put on your SharePoint 2010 farm. And so start planning when that's going to happen. Start planning, how you're going to do that, because we're getting close. And you're going to want to get SP2 on as soon as you can. In the chat room, Mark Chrisman asked if I know whether the slipstream problem that was introduced in the August 2012 CU has been fixed. I do not know. I haven't tried it yet, but that's a good question. I would like to think that it has, Mark, because when you download the notes for the patch, it calls out that it's got Windows 2012 support, and it calls out that you have to slipstream to get the Windows 2012 support. So I can only assume that the slipstreaming actually works, or they would just be jerks to tell you to do it and then have it not work. But if any of you have used this, let me know. Let me know if it's worked for you. What bill collectors? Let me know what your experience has been with either the April 2013 CU or Service Pack 2. Actually, so in the chat room, they're all noticing that I'm drinking coffee and they're afraid I'm going to be up all night. It's decaf. Don't worry. It's just cold here in Iowa. It's like 30 degrees. It snowed. It like flurried today at lunch. It was crazy. Okay, so not to be outdone, mostly, kind of. The April 2013 cumulative update for SharePoint 2013 is out, sort of. We've got the CU for SharePoint 2013 Foundation, and we've got the CU for the Office Web Apps. We do not have the CU for SharePoint Server. It is delayed for now. Honestly, Microsoft, take your time. Really, don't release this thing until you're absolutely positive that it's not going to destroy farms. So if you've got some Foundation farms you want to update, those patches are out there, and I'll give you a link to those. That will put your SharePoint 2013 farm at 15.0.4505. At least for Foundation, it does. When Server comes out, it may be a higher number. We'll see. But again, we know that's coming out. So this one, and this is not a March public update. This is a cumulative, yes, the March PU and then the April CU. So I'm guessing there was something that they had to get fixed before the April CU came out. And I haven't had a chance to look at it all. I've been traveling the last couple of weeks, so haven't gotten that figured out. So Jim in the chat room is asking what my Twitter handle is for those updates, and it's SP2013 patches and at SP2010 patches, and those are two Twitter accounts that I use. I only tweet patch information from there. So tomorrow, hopefully, though I got a pretty busy day tomorrow, tomorrow when I update my build list for 2013 for the April CU, for both of those, I will tweet out those links and all that kind of stuff so you can keep up. So again, these actually came out last week. I was going to talk about them last week. Just been busy, been traveling, haven't got around to it. But those are the places to follow. And then obviously toddklindt.com/SP2010 builds and SP2013 builds. And a few of you have been emailing me when you've got issues with patches. I appreciate that. I don't always give you a specific shout out here, but I do read them. Trevor Seward sent me one about one of these builds too that I need to take a look at. For the most part, I try not to post anything that I don't actually test myself. So I don't post a patch until I've downloaded it and installed it myself, which is why I don't get these out the day that they come out. And for problems that people have with patches, if I can't duplicate it myself, I don't always get it out right away. So that's kind of why there's some delay in there, because I like to double check these things. Hopefully help things out a little bit. A related topic, and this came out a couple of weeks ago, Russ Maxwell at Microsoft put a blog post out that I loved that said, why does the SharePoint 2013 public update take 5 hours to install? And so Russ, his handle, it's an MSDN blog. His handle is RussMax. You should all be subscribed to his blog. It's a great blog. Russ has all kinds of great stuff in there. But he talks about things shutting down and all that, and he shows a PowerShell script that he uses to shut a bunch of stuff down. And he said he took the install process for the March 2013 cumulative update, public update, from 5 hours to 15 minutes. So definitely a good thing to just kind of read through that, not necessarily do all the things that he said in there, but just to kind of understand why things take as long as they do. So I talked a little bit earlier about slipstreaming SharePoint 2010 patches in, and that's been out for a while. I actually blogged that twice because I'm an idiot, and blogged it once and then didn't realize it and blogged it again. But this time I'm going to try real hard to only blog once the SharePoint 2013 slipstreaming experience, and you can find that at toddklindt.com/SP2013 slipstream. And basically it's the same as SharePoint 2010. You take your SharePoint 2013 installation media, copy it to a hard drive. In the updates folder, you dump in whatever patch it is that you want to slipstream into your install. You run the install, poof, you're at the March PU or the April CU. Makes it pretty easy. Not a lot of changes. I say that it's the same for now because we've seen that patching can break, the slipstreaming can break, as it did in SharePoint 2010 with the August 2012 CU. And also, Microsoft has said that March PU is required for future patches because there's going to be some changing inside of the patching process, but they didn't say what. So who knows if they're going to break all this. I don't know. But again, pretty much the same. If you were able to do it in 2010, you can probably do it in 2013. Same kind of stuff. The blog post has lots and lots of pictures, so that should help a bunch of you out. I was on a roll. I blogged twice since the last Netcast. I don't believe that's happened in years. And this one was a response to somebody was on Twitter today, and they were asking if I had any recommendations for startup scripts. And I didn't, but I've done a PowerShell session here in the last couple of weeks, and I've added into that session, I've added a way to use PowerShell to start up your app pools. So I thought, great, I should just blog this. So basically, it's that problem that we all have every night between 2 and 3 or whatever. Our SharePoint app pools get recycled. That gives them a chance to do garbage collection and all that kind of stuff, which is great. because that keeps things more stable, keeps our servers happier. But then the first person to hit each web app, or at least each web app inside a given app pool, has to wait for that app pool to warm up, and that takes a long time. It takes longer than users want to wait. So this has been going on since SharePoint 2003. This is nothing new, and as the years have gone across, there have been a bunch of different ways to handle this. Doug's mentioning you can use System Center to do it. There are a bunch of different startup scripts. There's a bunch of ways to skin this cat. With SharePoint 2013 requiring PowerShell v3, there is now yet another way to skin that cat, and I feel terrible for the cats, by the way. They've done nothing to deserve this. In PowerShell v3, there's a new commandlet called invoke web request. Now, the idea behind this commandlet is to allow a command line way to download files from a website. In the old days, we used to use something called wget, which would do the same thing, or the Unix guys use a thing called curl, C-U-R-L, to do the same thing. Essentially, you just run the command, you say, here's the URL, download that file, drop it in my file system. And that's what invoke web request does. And invoke web request has a bunch of different parameters. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff that doesn't mean anything to us, but what it can do is it can light up a web app. If you do an invoke web request for a SharePoint web app, it hits the front page, it spins the app pool up, and SharePoint's happy. So I blogged today on how to use PowerShell to warm up SharePoint 2013, and I mean, I didn't go through all the different ways you can use it, but I essentially just did a get SP web application, and then for each web application I did the invoke web request for the root of the web app to spin up all the app pools. Pretty simple stuff. Had to put a couple parameters in to make sure that the authentication worked, because I don't have anonymous turned on the web apps that I set this up on. Now, a couple notes about this. Well, not every, but most web template have different DLLs that they use in the background, and the DLLs are the things that are getting warmed up when you warm up your app pools. Those DLLs are getting compiled and all that. So if you have a web app that the front page, the root site collection is a publishing site, well, that's going to warm up the web app, and it's going to warm up, all the DLLs for the publishing pieces, but team sites might take a little bit to come up, or a blog might take a little bit to come up, or my sites might take a little bit to come up. So if you like this and you plan it and you schedule and all that kind of stuff, you may end up having like a text file or a CSV file or something that has a site collection in each web app of each type, and then just hits that front page to make sure that all the different template types get hit and cycled through so that SharePoint is up and going. Now, you'll have to do this on all of your web front ends, everybody that handles end user requests. If you're using search to index any of those web front ends, you won't have to light those up. Search will do it for you. But in most cases, you probably have search indexing itself, so that doesn't really help you much. So hopefully that helps some folks, gets those web apps warmed up. I like this method because it is the least intrusive method. I use it before I go on stage for things to make sure all of my web apps are warmed up, that kind of stuff. And it's just a single line. It's pretty quick. I'm a big fan. That might just be because because it's my idea and all that. All right, so I got a couple. So I'm going to skip through here because I think there's some stuff I'm not going to get to talk about. So Jack in the chat room mentions you'll have to alter the host file for every WFE. I just assume that's the case. On every SharePoint installation I've done in the past 5 years, probably, every SharePoint server points to itself for every SharePoint web app. So that way the traffic doesn't go to the load balancer and all that. I have a PowerShell script that does that. I think if you go to toddklindt.com/edit hosts is my PowerShell script that does that. But yes, you're absolutely right, Jack. You will not want this traffic to go out to your load balancer and come back in. You want your SharePoint servers, not because of this, but just because it's a good idea, always pointing to themselves. So there were a bunch of like Microsoft posters and stuff, just kind of things like that that have come out for SharePoint in the last couple of weeks, and I want to make sure I get them all out here so you can see them. And the first one is, this is something that I know I've had some customers looking for estimating performance and capacity for SharePoint 2013. we're all just kind of new at the SharePoint 2013 thing. It just came out, 6 months ago. We're still trying to figure out where the sweet spot is for how many WFEs you need. Do you really need a dedicated search server? All that kind of stuff. And so this white paper kind of gives you an idea how to test that, how to generate workloads, that kind of stuff. That's out on TechNet, and that'll be in the show notes. Not going to cover that too much more than that. Another one that they put out is planning for high availability and disaster recovery. So this paper talks about, actually it's a bunch of links to other things. What I really like about this particular paper is that it has, one of the documents is a link to all the different types of databases inside of SharePoint 2013 and how you can make them highly available or have warm spares and that kind of stuff. And it walks down every type of database and says, yes, it supports log shipping, yes, it supports SQL 2012, always on availability groups, blah, blah, blah. So that's just a good reference point for that. And they talk about other stuff, but that's really where the meat of that one is. There was a very similar document for SharePoint 2010. This is just the SharePoint 2013 version of that. Another one that came out is kind of a poster, and it maps out a bunch of what they call traditional topologies for SharePoint 2013. And this is a good one. I sent this to our sales folks as kind of the beginnings for how to spec out farms for users. So it talks about, this is what a publishing farm would look like, this is what a search-heavy farm would look like, blah, blah. And so it kind of gives you an idea how many machines you would need, what roles they would have, that kind of stuff. And again, it's just a starting point. You're not going to want to look at one of these topology models and say, that's exactly the thing that I want. But it is a starting spot. And it's a good one. It's pictures. Everybody loves pictures. You can get it as a PDF or a Visio, a VSD, but just good little documentation there. Another one that came out, and boy, this one is like this thing changes its mind more often than I can even keep track of. So now, as of April 4th, and you're going to want to write this on a calendar or something, as of April 4th, SharePoint 2013 does support stretched farms. Now, if you remember, about 3 weeks ago, Microsoft put out a thing that said that it does not support stretched farms. Geez. So basically what has happened is the stretched farm is this idea that you have one SharePoint farm, but the servers are in different locations. So they're not all in one data center. They might be in 2 different buildings. They might be in 2 different cities. I've seen people want to have them on. I've seen people have them on separate coasts of the U.S., like in L.A., San Francisco, and Boston. A stretched farm. In SharePoint 2007, people did it a lot, and it mostly worked. It was tolerable. In 2010, Microsoft didn't really say that they supported it out of the box, but there were a bunch of things that didn't work, and if it didn't work, tough, don't do it, and that was kind of their philosophy. When 2013 came out, they put their foot in the sand and said, or drew a line in the sand and said, we don't support stretched farms at all. If it's a stretched farm, we don't support it, knock it off, don't do that, stop it. And then they put out this blog post that says that they support it. Now, in reality, their position hasn't changed for SharePoint 2013. What they have done, though, is they have put some hard, fast numbers to what defines a stretched farm and what they do support. So essentially, you can do whatever you want as long as the latency between every box is less than 1 millisecond. So again, nothing has changed. That's always kind of been the sweet spot, and they've got a couple articles about that. But once you get outside of that 1 millisecond, then things start to get kind of fuzzy. So, if you've got a super fat pipe and you've got 2 buildings on opposite sides of town, if the latency between them is less than 1 millisecond, you're good to go. But you got to keep in mind that all of this stuff, the laws of physics start to sneak in at some point. Light can only move so fast in a millisecond. Things can only be so far apart. But that's basically what this says. They haven't changed their stance so much as they've defined it better. 1 millisecond. And like I said, there's some, I linked to Stefan Gostner's page, but there is a TechNet article behind it that talks about all these limitations. So you end up with unrealistic business expectations sometimes that get you pushed into corners where people need you to try to do this stretched farm thing. So this document will talk about how best to handle all that. And Trevor in the chat room got out pen and paper, and he said that the light will travel 184 miles in 1 millisecond. So that is the upper limit. If your data centers are 185 miles apart, too bad. It just won't work, and it's not supported. So read that over. If you want to do something crazy with stretched farms, that's the official word for now. I'm sure when May comes out, they'll have some new information about that and all that. Yeah, Trevor, yeah, we're assuming this is in a vacuum. And downhill, I think. I think the light has to travel downhill to make it the whole 184 miles in 1 millisecond. I think that's, if I remember high school physics well, I think that it's downhill. We got a couple of minutes. So another thing that I wanted to bring up is Victor Weiland, because I just feel like every one of his blog posts is golden, and I have to talk to you guys about it. Talks about how if you've got a web app and you've got My Site pictures coming up, you might get bumped for authentication a couple times and things might not show up. And so he talks about a web application policy, called cross-domain photos enabled. If you set that to true, it'll bring it over. His blog is at wictorwinlen.se. If you listen to this netcast, you should already be subscribed to his blog. He's way smarter than I am. He puts out lots of good blog posts. But this one came out here a couple of weeks ago. But I've had a couple of people, even since this blog post came out, ask me about this. They're like, oh, when I log in, I get this thing, and I can't see my profile pictures. This is the fix for that. So read that over. Read all of Victor's blog posts over, honestly. But if you've got questions about profile pictures, that's the way to go. Okay, so I'm going to talk about one last thing that isn't strictly SharePoint, but is something that that everybody that listens to this blog or this netcast should pay attention to, and that is the PowerShell, the scripting games. Now, the scripting games have been going on for a few years. It used to be the Ed Wilson, those guys, the scripting guys used to put it on, and this year it's the folks at PowerShell.org, which I'm loosely affiliated. I'm a moderator in their SharePoint forum. But the folks at PowerShell.org, I think if you go to PowerShell.org/games, or just go to the front page of PowerShell.org, this is the annual scripting games for PowerShell. Now, what I mean to say is that everybody, if you're a SharePoint IT pro, you need to know PowerShell, and there's no better way to learn it than to hang out in places like this. So let me tell you a little bit about the scripting games. The scripting games, if I remember correctly, have 6 different competitions, and once a week you get an assignment, and then you have to write PowerShell code to satisfy that assignment. And there are 2 tracks. There's a beginner track and an advanced track, and the assignments are roughly the same. You have the same kind of things that you need to do, but for the beginner track, they're saying you can just give us a one-liner. Pack it all into one line and you're fine. For the advanced track, they're saying we want the same solution, but we want error handling, we want it to be a function, we want it to have, parameters correct, all that kind of stuff. So even if you don't know anything about PowerShell, you can still jump into the beginner track and see what's going on. They have a practice event out there to kind of give you an idea of the thing that they're looking for, and it's a pretty reasonable event. You can see for the practice event, what they want is you to take a text file with host names or IP addresses and then return back the uptime for all those boxes. So you're gonna, you're gonna import the file, you're gonna grab onto WMI, you're gonna those kind of things. But go out there, look at the practice event, and sign up for the scripting games. Registration starts April 22nd, so a week from today, and the awesome thing is, so there's obviously prizes for the beginners and advanced. They give prizes through a bunch of places, I forget. The main prize is a free pass to TechEd, US or Europe, so that's pretty cool. But what's also cool is even if you're afraid to actually, or just don't have time to join the scripting games, you can sign up to be a judge, and judges get prizes too. So you can go out and look at the other the contestants and look at their solutions to whatever the event was and judge them, and they give you an idea on how to judge them. And if you judge them, you get points for judging, and then judges will get prizes as well. So go to PowerShell.org/games. Get ready to sign up for that on Monday. It's it's fun stuff. You can't be too good at PowerShell if you're a SharePoint admin. So please go out and sign up for that. Okay, so I think that's all the topics I'm going to go through tonight. I've got a couple that I'll push over to next week. Now for the part you're all here for, the self-promotion part. The very first thing that I want to promote is tomorrow, April 16th. I'm doing a long-distance chat for the Slovenian SharePoint user group. You can hook up with them at slospug.si. I'm going to be doing my SQL talk for them. For me, it's 10:30 in the morning. For them, I think it's in the afternoon. It's I think they're 5 hours, 6 hours ahead, something like that. So one of their guys has been talking to me for a while, trying to get me in there, and I keep scheduling things poorly, that kind of stuff. But it's actually going to happen tomorrow. So if you're in Slovenia, definitely want to check that out. I was in Slovenia in the fall for vacation. Took a cruise in the Mediterranean. Spent a day in Koper and Piran. Great times. I look forward to going back to Slovenia. So you can check me out there if you are in Slovenia. The next thing, April 23rd, I've got that Penton event that I talked about the last time. I still don't have a URL for that. I don't know if that's being advertised at like SharePoint Pro Mag or whatever, but I'll be talking about Upgrade, I believe, for that. So if you're going to be at the Penton event on April 23rd and you see an upgrade session, that's going to be mine. Well, the SharePoint 2013 Professional Administration book is still not out yet. Ugh. So still waiting. I think maybe next week, week after, something like that. But I think what I'm going to do is going to go ahead and start a sign up for the signed autographed copies of the book. I think I'm going to do that. And I'm probably going to set something up for people who bought my self-published book, Free Advice. I'll probably do something like give them $5 off, because that's what free advice costs. So if you bought Free Advice, I'll probably give you $5 off the book if you buy it from me. But I need to get a blog post up on that and get that promoted, but hopefully next week or the week after. So hopefully you've all got that pre-ordered at Amazon. If you do want to order a physical book that will be autographed by myself, I will have that up on my blog. I need to get that all straightened out. But if you want that, you will have that as well. Right. Well, then the next thing going on is TechEd in both North America, in New Orleans, and in Europe, in Madrid. And I'll be doing both of those. I'm going to be doing a day-long session in both of those, and then I think like one admin session breakout or something like that. So if you're going to be in either of those, come find me. I think Rackspace will have a booth at the North America one. I don't think they'll have one at the European one. But that was so that was an interesting thing. When I was in Australia, I always tell folks before I go to a conference, you know, if you see me at the conference, come find me and say, hey, I'm a pretty social guy, pretty approachable. And I bet 20 people in Australia came up at that SharePoint conference and said they listened to the Netcast and read the blog and all that. So that is awesome. And you can talk to any of them. I'm real friendly. Was very gracious to hear all that kind of stuff. As you can imagine, the blog and the Netcast and all that kind of stuff takes a lot of work, takes a lot of time. I love doing it, but it's always good to know that someone's getting value from it. So when you come up to me and you say, hey, I downloaded your Netcast, I learned some stuff on it, it was great. That helps. That keeps me motivated. That keeps me excited about doing the Netcast and, you know, not being able to tuck my kids in on Monday nights and that kind of stuff. So if you're going to be in New Orleans for TechEd or in Madrid, Spain for TechEd Europe, come find me, go to my session, say hey, something like that. I would love to talk to you. If you've got suggestions on how I can make the Netcast better, absolutely shoot those off. You may have noticed that I've tried to get more reliable about having, you know, the Netcast number and the monitor behind me. That's all because of Jack in the chat room. He told me that was cool, said he liked it, had some ideas on how I could make it better, and so that's one of the things that I'm doing. So definitely I listen to your advice. There are about 1 million things I could do to make this Netcast better, so hearing your guys' suggestions definitely helps. So those are all the events that I have going on now. Talking to some other folks about some things, but for now that is it. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate your help. Jim in the chat room is asking where the show notes located. I blog every Netcast, and the notes are in the blog post for the Netcast. So, and for every Netcast, you can just go to my www.toddklindt.com/netcast150/netcast149, and that will give you all the links, and then all the links to download the podcast Netcast, and all of the links that I talked about in the Netcast. They're all in there. So, so everybody, thank you. Went over a little bit tonight. Tried to go as quickly as I could. It's great to be back. I will see you all next week. No trips planned. So, thanks everybody, and have a good night.